Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Education. I'm Millette Green. On this edition, we discuss Storycorps, using oral history to educate a generation. Storycorps is an acclaimed American oral history project that recognizes the power and value in the stories of everyday people. So far, Storycorps has collected some 36,000 American voices, the largest collection of American audio recordings ever gathered. Today, we learn more about Storycorps' three basic initiatives. Storycorps Griot, which has archived the life stories of thousands of African Americans at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The National Teachers Initiative, which celebrates the courageous work of at least 625 public school teachers across the country. And Storycorps U, an interactive college-based readiness program. Its curriculum is already in 8 schools and 19 classrooms in Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and New York City. First, let's take a look at Storycorps.
That day when I called you, this patient comes in and he's got a benign tumor. It's pushing on his speech area. He can get some words out, but it's almost unintelligible. They asked me who inspired me. So, of course, I mentioned you. We have the surgery. He gets his speech back, and he's just excited and happy and crying and wanted to just hug me. And he said, "You make sure you call that teacher."
I said, of all the people in your entire career, you want to thank me. It was the same feeling I had when my kids were born.
Well, I always knew I was poor, but remember one time in particular, my shoes were all scraped up. So I got paint and I painted them white. Some kid fell and tripped in front of my shoes. I noticed it and he pointed it out and laughed, and that's when it hit me really hard. Like, I'm actually poorer than I thought.
How's your first semester of college been?
Things are great. I just think about it like being the first one to go to college and my whole family of over 50 of us. That's my biggest motivation.
You know, and I have so many students where everything's stacked against them. What happens is they get almost there and then they just quit. You know, I really want you to be the one that finished.
What brought you to teaching?
Well, I had a 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Litch, and she wrote on my report card, I still have it, "Born is severely handicapped," or something like that. And that made me so mad. I failed the 5th grade, and then Miss Burbridge, she took me under her wing and showed me that I wasn't severely handicapped. And I always will remember her. I sit back and I figure out what each one of the children's needs are. I do it voluntarily now. For what, 7, 9 years, I haven't missed a day.
Joining me now to talk about Storycorps using oral history to educate a generation is Melvin Reeves, Associate Director of Education and Special Projects at Storycorps. We also have with us Yvonne Waller, Principal of Cesar Chavez Public Charter School for Public Policy, Parkside High School campus in Washington, D.C., where the Storycorps U curriculum was eagerly adopted. And we welcome both of you to the program. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Melvin, let's start with you. This is an exciting venture, just a huge undertaking. How did it all come about?
Well, it's really based on what Storycorps does, as you really described it so well. We believe that the stories of everyday people are as important as the stories of all the famous people that we read about. And so that's really based on the notion that the people themselves are really very, very important. And so when we think about kids, first of all, there is a growing discipline called narrative education that essentially believes in the use of stories. And secondly, we believe that these kids have magnificent stories because ultimately they're magnificent people. And so we're just following up on our request from numerous educators to use Storycorps in the classroom.
Okay, so let's talk about the stories we see in Storycorps. What do we see? We see young people talking about their lives. We see their parents talking. Real people with ordinary experiences that are extraordinary in many ways.
I absolutely agree. And I think that we always, for example, ask the parents or the kids to ask their parents about their own views on education. And part of what I think we're doing here is dispelling some of the myths that Black and Latino kids in particular are subject to. And so in terms of stories, one of the things that we find is that the parents are always vocally supportive of having their kids achieve educationally. So that there are many stories like that. Then there are just stories such as when kids talk to their parents and learn about their immigration experiences, they don't always recognize, and we try to help them recognize, the strength that their family had to have had this experience, and we suggest to them that these are strengths that they can use to further their education. So those are a couple of examples.
The kids learn so much about their parents, and they learn so much about themselves. And it elevates how they look at their culture, at their personal lives, in so many ways, I would imagine.
I absolutely agree with you. And the way we look at these kids, our view, I think that oftentimes when you think of Black and Latino students, what you hear is about the difficulties that they face where they live, in their homes, in their communities. You hear euphemisms such as talk of the challenges they face. But I think really what's more helpful is to help these kids understand that if you have those challenges and you're still coming to school every day, for me that means that you're a magnificent young person who has strengths which you may not be fully aware of, that you can capitalize on and build on to really achieve whatever it is you want to achieve in life. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we bring in Principal Waller, I want to talk about the wonderful opportunity to capture the stories, but also have them at the Smithsonian. What do you hope will come out of that?
Well, I think that first of all, I mean, when we think about ourselves, if speaking for myself, I can only tell you how wonderful it would be if I had a recording of my parents saying anything to me.
Absolutely.
Even when
or your grandparents.
Or my grandparents, or my cousins, folks who have passed away. That would just be of unestimatable value for me at this time, because I would have their presence in this really vibrant way right now, today in my life. When we talk about archiving interviews at the Library of Congress, at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, we're also talking about people's stories being available permanently for their children and their children's children. And we're also talking about providing a basis for expanding the history that we know about, because it is about people's stories that eventually is written about, that becomes the books we read.
That takes us into, of course, Storycorps Griot. Tell us what that means so people can know.
Well, Storycorps Griot was an initiative. It is an initiative that was funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, essentially to collect the stories of African Americans around the country. And so in our first year of that initiative, we went to 26 cities in probably 10 different states and collected more than 1,850 interviews of everyday Black people in the many different ways we live our lives, and in the many different kind of reflections of history that we have. That's what we did.
And when you talk about the griot part of West African history, I mean, this goes back to the motherland.
Yes.
And in doing something like this, it just touches the core in the community.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the griot is an honored position within some West African societies in which they're the maintainer of community history and tradition. So we probably remember roots where Alex Haley eventually was way out in the jungle, and he sat with a griot who read back the tribe's history for probably 4 or 5 hours backwards. He read this history, and then he mentioned Kunta Kinte, and that's how he made that link. That's what a griot does. And so in Storycorps Griot, for example, we're affirming the oral tradition that African Americans have always had.
And it would be nice to take that experience and to start that again in our communities and tell our stories the way we want them told.
That initiative has never really ended. So Storycorps is always about the work of encouraging African Americans to participate in Storycorps.
That brings us to the next initiative, and I want to bring Principal Yvonne Waller in, of course, the Teachers Initiative and putting their stories together and archiving them for educational purposes.
I think a lot of teachers do not often get to speak about the love for children and the love for this profession around teaching and learning, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for teachers to be able to have that voice as well as teach children to have that voice.
So 625 public school teachers recorded already?
Over the upcoming year.
And continuing to add to that. So will you pick the teachers? How does it work? How does it work? You find a school that's interested.
I think for our campus, we are going to be using all of the teachers that are actually implementing the program in our advisory, our collegiate prep advisory course. So all of the teachers that are using the program with the students will actually participate in being interviewed and highlighted in the piece.
And I love this for your school, especially so because it is in Ward 7, a section of the city that many people think, oh, those people don't care about education. Those people are not doing what they need to do to help themselves get out of a challenging situation. But that's so not true.
So not true.
Yeah.
We have so many amazing parents, the wonderful community in Ward 7, and the children are so eager to get their stories out. I mean, so often we're not talking to children in Ward 7 and Ward 8, and we're not talking to families in Ward 7 and Ward 8 to get firsthand their opinions and their passion around education and around ensuring that their children have a wonderful education and have that opportunity to let their voices be heard.
Are they talking about their passion that is still there when so many things are being said that is negative about public education and teachers and reform? What are you hearing?
Well, some of the stories that I've heard from your teachers, in fact, are when we did a 2-day training at your school, I was impressed by the story that one of your teachers told me, that he basically moved to Washington, D.C. to work at your school, moving from South Texas.
Yes. Fantastic.
And part of what attracted him to your school was, in fact, the kind of program that we're implementing there. Which is really building on the work you already do, which is about having the teachers establish relationships of value with the kids, as the kids also define.
Critical.
21st century teaching. You got to adapt to the kids today. Relatable, educational styles and approaches, right?
You have to. The child is different now, and the approach has to be different. I think in education, we constantly have to stay abreast of the ways in which our students learn. This is the 21st century, technology, all of the things that children have access to. Their mind is working overtime, their brain is working overtime, and it's important that education catches up with that. To spark the interest of students takes skill, and it takes us adapting ourselves. And so the way that we learned is not the way that our children learn, and so we have to adapt to that. And I think it's exciting. It's exciting for teachers, and it's exciting for students to see adults passionate about wanting to excite them about education.
So in the Teachers Initiative portion, the teachers record their stories, and do they show the students the stories during the semester? How does it all work, or is it up to the discretion of the teacher in the school?
Storycorps interviews go 2 places. One, at the end of it, and by the way, I should mention that a Storycorps interview is best understood as a conversation between 2 people who probably know each other, who get to choose what they want to talk about. And so
it could be 2 teachers talking to each other.
It could be 2 teachers, or it could be a teacher speaking to a former student or a mentor.
Wonderful.
Anybody that the teacher wants to talk to, and they get to choose what they want to talk about, and they also get to choose what happens with their own CD. And some of those interviews that are done, facilitated by Storycorps, end up being broadcast on National Public Radio.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And so we come to the next initiative, which is Storycorps U. And Melvin, tell us more about that.
Well, Storycorps U basically resulted from our organizational experience of being asked by teachers to do Storycorps stuff in schools repeatedly.
Yeah.
And so again, we've talked a little bit here about this growing field called narrative education, but essentially we're just following the teacher's lead, and we've come up with a curriculum that is a college readiness curriculum that has 3 units. And so what we're asking is that students have an opportunity to look at where they're from, our history, where they are now, and of course where they're going. And we're hoping that this is going to be supportive of the kind of academic performance that will make us all proud. That's part of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But there is one other big part that we're doing here. I think that we're also giving the teachers a kind of experience with their students that the students value.
Yeah.
And one of the things that students say, according to a lot of research, is that they will be more connected to school to the extent that their teachers are interested in not only their academic performance, but who they are as whole people.
Their lives.
That's
good.
That make any sense to you?
A lot of sense.
Especially since you sought out Storycorps.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. It was an amazing, it's been an amazing experience just to have the program at our school. And I think with the adoption of Common Core across our nation and the rigor that is required in classrooms, it also requires that connection in a classroom to be able to push students to the level that we want them to achieve. And I think having that connection with the teacher, from teacher to student and student to teacher, is critical for a student to know, especially with all that our children are dealing with outside of school, and to know that people inside the building truly care about you and want to share their own stories of struggle, because all of us have a story. All of us have something to share and to communicate to our young people, and so often our young people don't have an opportunity to hear those stories. You know, I often tell my students, you don't have to make the same mistakes, but we need to tell you the mistakes that we've made, and to tell you how we've triumphed, and to tell you how to navigate through some things. And so I think that's such an important piece inside the classroom, especially.
Oh yeah, I mean, young people often feel disconnected to their teacher. Who is this person telling me what to do and giving me information that I'm really not interested in? But this is a great way to make that connection more real and more valuable, like you said. This is it.
We hope. We also know that students quite often are bored in school.
Yes.
Now, as adults, we probably think that too bad, because that's what being an adult is like. But the fact of the matter is that nearly half of students, according to many surveys, are bored on a daily basis in school. And similarly, unfortunate percentages of students do not find what they're being taught particularly relevant. And so that's all what we're also trying to address.
Quite frankly, because we do have a crisis in our schools, as you mentioned, and with our young boys, we're losing them by the 4th grade. And so we have to be able to find a way to connect with them in a different way that's much more valuable and much more personal. And that's what this does.
It does. Our collegiate prep advisory is gender-based. So the gentlemen are in a group together to do the Storycorps curriculum, which is awesome because it gives them an opportunity to connect with their teachers and themselves, and to really hear that male voice. There's something, you know, very powerful in a group of males identifying their stories and identifying powerful things about their stories and sharing that. And so I think that helps students to stay connected inside of school when you have those type of connections with your teachers and amongst your students.
And I would think at first it would be hard to get people to open up and talk about themselves.
Right. Well, it takes time. It does take time to establish the sort of trust, not only with the teacher, but with your fellow students, that allows you to feel comfortable that you can tell your stories.
It's a certain nakedness that you have to be okay with because you're opening yourself up.
That's correct. But as we open ourselves up, we are oftentimes surprised to find that we share an experience and feelings with people sitting right next to us and did not know that. So there's some bonding that can go on there, and there is some kind of group culture that can develop around that sort of shared experience that can be supportive again, of academic performance, which is ultimately what our
Yes.
principal here wants to make sure we
Absolutely.
support. Right?
What kind of impact will this especially have in the minority community, African American community in particular?
I think it's so important, as you stated earlier, because it stems from our roots of sharing our stories and collectively coming together to empower each other. I think what I see happening with the program at my school is that students feeling empowered and enriched by their stories and their teacher stories. You know, we're a college prep public policy school, so we do seek to instill in our students that power of the voice. And I think, you know, one of the things a major thing that we want to get from the program is that our students feel that they have a voice. Because in talking to young people, you know, not only in this city, but around our country, feeling as though they don't have that voice. And so when you're able to find that voice in yourself and to recognize the strength in your own story, you're able to perform better. You're able to have better relationships, and you're able to not only be successful in high school and college, but also in life. And so that's really what our school's mission is, which is why I gravitated to bring Storycorps to our school, because it aligns right to what we want for our young people.
Yeah, kids want to know they matter.
Exactly.
We all want to matter.
We all want to matter.
Yes.
And we all do matter, but sometimes it's overlooked or forgotten or not recognized.
So what's the big picture? Where is Storycorps going with this this collection, the interviews that continue? What are we going to see down the road?
Well, I think Storycorps expects to be around forever, and we do intend to continue to build essentially this growing library of American voices that's fully reflective of the diversities that exist in our country. And we further will continue our foray into the educational field in ways that Principal Waller will support and find valuable.
And the life stories of African American people, of people of Latin descent, are so varied. And I think this is such a great way for kids and adults to travel without having to travel, because they're finding out my story and your story and your story, and our stories are different, and we come from different places and walks of life.
Right. Well, actually, that's for me, one of the main resources that Storycorps has that enables us to be at your school is this collection of stories of African Americans, of Latinos, of Asians, as well as white people. But the stories that we're using here pretty much focus on African Americans and Latinos, and they're reflective of all the kind of challenges that we're concerned about and want to prepare our kids to be able to cope with. And that really is the strength of where we start from.
And I see it as a great way to refocus ourselves, because Principal Waller, we're so celebrity obsessed.
Yes.
And what matters to them is what really matters. And that's so not true. And so maybe we can kind of turn attention back to what really matters.
I hope so. And that's the goal. You know, celebrity and reality television is definitely something that is intriguing to our young people, but it's powerful when you realize your own reality and you realize, you know, just how much impact you can have on the world. And so I think making that shift, this is definitely a start in assisting our students in making that shift.
So you're starting with the 10th grade.
We are.
And how do you see it growing and developing? Because I know that, you know, it's starting, but you see it kind of flourishing. What are your thoughts?
I do see it flourishing. I see it flourishing so that it could be incorporated through all of our grades. We have grades 9 through 12, and so seeing it grow with the students, so adding a grade each year is hopefully what we want to do with the program.
When educators see...
Well, can we just say thank you?
Oh, yes. Well, we do. That's why we have her here, because we're celebrating what she has done in her school. And so another educator will find out about this when they watch this program. How can they adopt the Storycorps curriculum in their school? What's the process? Because I know you train the teachers too, right?
We have a 2-day training, and what we try to do is to give the teachers the kind of experience that they will in turn give the students. And so people who want to participate in Storycorps in general or with this specific education program, stay tuned to Storycorps. Listen to Storycorps on NPR, go to the website, and just follow the links, and you'll end up with somebody at the end, at the Storycorps end, who will be glad to help you and bring you into the Storycorps family.
Principal Waller, were the teachers receptive to this idea of telling their stories at first? How was that challenge?
You know what, you always have a great mix, but for the most part, our teachers were excited to have the opportunity to connect with students on that level.
Yeah.
After the 2-day training, the teachers were glowing. They were so excited to begin implementing the program, and we did the training in the summer prior to having the students come back. And teachers were genuinely excited to be able to share that story with students. It's a very non-traditional approach to have teachers and even administrators open up in that way to students, and I think that's what's needed with our children. I mean, it's very out the box in terms of sharing your story and allowing students into that side besides just the content that you teach, but it's so powerful in terms of building those relationships and keeping our children in school and having that support that they need.
Absolutely, and using this with this overall goal of providing another way of educating our youngsters is key. It's very, 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 it's another way to enhance the educational experience that we desperately need.
Right, and part of that, and I'd love to hear your opinions about this, there seems to be a growing body of research to the effect that test scores are less predictive of overall success than our kind of non-cognitive stuff, the types of skills and attributes that we're kind of trying to bring out in this sort of work, having to do with sharing your self-awareness, your social awareness, those sorts of things, perseverance. Other characteristics may have more to do with success than test scores. So it's all important as a package, but combined is really where you have the strongest impact.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to both of you for this edition of Let's Talk Education. Melvin Reeves, our thanks so much for coming down from New York to speak with us about Storycorps and all of its initiatives. And Principal Yvonne Waller, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for adopting the out-of-the-box kind of educational strategies that help your children over there in Ward 7. Thank you, thank you. Thank you to both of you.
And thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Let's Talk Education. I'm Molette Green. We'll see you next time.